So that's what we're going to be doing today. And we're going to specifically take a look at these single case experimental designs, because these are designs that you will most likely encounter, especially if you go into clinical work. So we're going to take a look at single case experiments and illustrate the need for single case experimental designs. And by single case, we mean very small numbers of subjects all the way down to just one subject. All right, so single case experiments, these are also known as single subject designs. And they're also known as small n designs. So n is typically set aside to stand in for the number of subjects that you have in a experiment. So if you're doing an experiment and n equals 20, that means you have 20 subjects. Well, sometimes you don't have a lot of subjects. Sometimes you might have only 3 subjects or only 2 subjects. Or in the case of a single subject design, you might have only 1 subject. So these are special types of experiments, special experimental designs that are required to determine if your independent variable has an effect, if your independent variable is actually doing something when you're dealing with this very small number of subjects. And we're bringing this one up, and it could be important for many of you if you go into clinical psychology, because oftentimes these are the designs that help you determine whether a treatment has been successful for a single patient. So if you are treating an individual, which a lot of psychological treatments are, you're treating an individual, you have an individual client, in that case you might design a treatment specifically for them. And as a psychologist, you need to know whether that treatment is effective or if it's ineffective in order to be able to ethically treat your patients. So in that case, we're going to have these single case experimental designs that we'll take a look at today. So they're often used in clinical trials, clinical interventions. They're also often used when subjects are rare. So if you're outside of clinical psychology, if you're in experimental psychology or in other areas of psychology, you might deal with rare subjects that just because of their characteristics don't occur very often. So this is the case with certain rare mental disorders. It's part of psychology. We want to understand these mental disorders. But if they occur in 1 in every million individuals, it might be hard to get a sample size of 100 for these individuals. You're basically looking at almost every single one in the United States population. It's going to be difficult to come by. So rare mental disorders, also rare mental traits, right? Looking on the positive side, sometimes you want to study people with really outstanding talents that make them incredibly unique. So one example of this is Stephen Wilshire. He's known as a human camera. And we'll take a look at a video of his capabilities. And, suffice it to say, he's incredibly unique. So let's take a look at exactly what he can do.
For this film, we're testing the living camera in
Can anybody hear this in the back?
Stephen has never seen the Eternal
So
City.
let's all just be very quiet.
After only a 45-minute helicopter flight, we'll ask him to draw a 5.5-yard panoramic picture of the historic city centre. Without having a second glance at it, Stephen has 3 days.
Okay, so just because we've kind of missed the intro here, just very briefly. So Stephen has never seen Rome. He's never been there before. And what they're going to do is they're going to take him up in a helicopter, and he is going to get 1 helicopter ride around Rome. He's going to be up there for 40 minutes, taking a look at all of Rome. And then they're going to ask him to then draw Rome from memory and see exactly how he does.
In these 3 days, Stephen will have to keep the thousands of details in his head. The innumerable cupolas, the tiny winding streets, all the balconies and windows of the endless array of houses, and each and every column and the window arch of Rome's major sites, from the Pantheon to St. Peter's to the Colosseum. 5.5 yards of paper can look scarily empty. The amazing thing, Stephen starts the drawing as we would, at the Church of St. Peter's. But he doesn't do any sketches, nor roughing out of the space for the drawing. It's as if the panorama already existed within his head, with all the proportions, all the roads, all the details. At the end of the second day, Stephen is a good halfway through his creation. After 3 days of his drawing marathon, even Stephen Wiltshire starts to tire. He has filled in more than 5 yards of paper in fine pencil. He has been restlessly aligning window to window and house to house, because Stephen loves to be applauded for his art. In the left corner, he's finally reached the ruins of the Forum Romanum. Stephen's sister Annette is rejoicing with him. He's made it. Obviously, he's pleased with his work.
All right, so that was Stephen Wiltshire drawing this, and basically he had a 40-minute helicopter ride and then sat down and for 3 days drew this panorama of Rome from memory, just from what he remembers from that 40-minute trip. And what they did is they actually compared this to the actual map of Rome, just to make sure that he's not drawing something that looks like a city. And sure enough, all of these little roads were correct. And the number of windows and floors on these buildings was correct. And the view of the basilica and the amount of forest that you could see was correct from the vantage point of the helicopter, really indicating that he has this sort of imprint in his mind about what he saw, and he's not just building it off of regular facts. And in fact, there were very few errors. So the windows and columns on the Colosseum here, those were all correct. I think one of the few errors was these lines here shouldn't be vertical. They should be horizontal lines, so we got that incorrect. But basically, all these little streets, all these little houses, everything drawn from memory after a 40-minute ride in a helicopter over Rome. So Stephen Wiltshire is fascinating. If you're a memory researcher, here is this mystery of how does this man remember all of this information. And if you wanted to study Stephen Wiltshire, you would need to use these single subject experimental designs, because you're not going to find many other individuals like him. You can't put out a call and expect 20 individuals with his memory abilities and his drawing abilities to show up at your door. There's probably not even 10 individuals like him in the world. So if you were a memory researcher and you're like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating, what an opportunity for psychology, you would at best have access to one individual. And you would have to use these single subject experimental designs to account for the fact that you're dealing with such a small number of subjects. All right, so you can use it when subjects are rare mental disorder, rare mental traits. You can use it when specifically trained subjects are also needed. So sometimes you need experts. You need experts in a field. You need people with expertise in certain types of knowledge. So, for example, if you're doing research in the psychology of art, oftentimes you will split your subjects into novice, everyday, typical subjects, and art experts, really educated art experts. And you might not get a whole bunch of different art experts. Other ones include trained observers. So I remember when I was doing research on color vision when I was doing my postdoc in the University of Nevada, Reno, we needed trained observers to do a lot of this, the distinctions between the conditions in our color research, because we needed to ask them, well, which one of these are different on saturation? Which one of these is different in hue? Which one of these is different in brightness? And unless you can really keep those very clear in your mind, it might be difficult to get good data. So for instance, if we were running that here with the faculty that we have available here at IUSB, some of the color ones, especially when we were getting into more complicated, color spaces and things like that, we might only have one trained observer, whoever that guy is. You might only have the one trained observer that is able to participate in that experiment. And I know in our own experiments, when I was, again, doing my postdoc, we would publish research with three individuals, three subjects. And it would be me, it would be the supervisor, and it would be one of the other grad students. And I would publish with me, my supervisor, and one other grad student, and he would publish with himself, his supervisor, and me. So we would basically just trade hours in the lab as working as subjects, because again, we needed those trained observers. We just couldn't recruit from a introductory subject pool. All right, and then sometimes your subjects will be unique. So they're not just rare, they're literally one of a kind. And oftentimes that has to do with the fact that you're dealing with subjects with a unique history. And this often happens when you're dealing with clinical treatments. So if you're treating somebody for a mental disorder, if you're treating somebody for a mental illness, a lot of times that mental illness was produced via a unique history that person and that person alone experienced. And then you develop your treatment based on that unique history. You develop a treatment that will really work for this one person only. And that treatment, you can think of it as an experiment. You're literally testing, does this treatment work? Does this treatment have an effect? And because of that, you can think of it as a single case experiment. So we're going to take a look at an example of this. And we're going to take a look at Harry, a self-injurious individual. So he is, you can see him here through a one-way mirror. He's an individual that literally smashes his fist into his face. He bites himself. He smashes his nose into his knee as a way of controlling other individuals. And they treat this behavioral disorder, but they do it in a way that was specifically designed for Harry. It was specifically designed because of Harry's history of using this type of self-abuse to control others. It was specifically designed for the fact that Harry loved to be in restraints. He found restraints highly reinforcing, another kind of unique feature. So they developed this treatment to treat Harry, and then once it's developed, they needed to test to make sure that it was actually what was causing Harry's decrease in injurious behavior. And we'll actually see footage from that treatment to take a look at how this is implemented in a real world setting.